Hey everybody, it's Charles from HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm taking your questions on oil leaks, no heat, counterfeit versus genuine parts, and more. This is episode 177 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, it's a frosty 16 degrees outside, which makes for a chilly day in the studio. But I'm still going to take your questions. If you want to get a question on a show like this, be sure to email me, charles@humblemechanic.com. Put question for Charles in the subject, ask the question right at the top, mash that enter button a few times, then give me the details of your question. Also, if you don't see your question on a show like this, be sure to check out the Quick Videos playlist on YouTube, where I answer one question per video. All right, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. Also, a lot of you guys have been sending me questions and comments on like Facebook message and Instagram message. That's awesome and I really appreciate it. But Facebook changed the alerts, so I don't always get them right away. So if you don't see me respond to that question, shoot me an email or ask the question again on that messaging system, and I'll try and do my best to get back with you. Now, with all that wrapped up, let's go ahead and get into your questions. First one comes from Bill. It says, "Hi, I'm a retired VW mechanic / police officer. I worked on Volkswagens in the 60s through the 80s. My wife has a 2010 Jetta 2.0 turbo. There is no heat into the interior. I checked the hoses that go in and out of the heater core. The fan blows, the door changes the airflow. That all seems to work, but no heat comes out of any vent. I've looked at your videos before and they were helpful. Thanks, Bill." Bill, thanks for the kind words. So you checked like the main stuff. We need to make sure that the heater core is getting hot, which it kind of sounds like it is. The only other thing that I've seen cause this, and actually on the same generation Jetta, is the temperature sensor inside of the heater box. There's a temperature sensor inside the heater box so that it knows what the temperature of the air is inside the box, right? Temperature sensor inside the box. And I've seen that not completely die, where it reads like -40 or 165 or 220, whatever the max reading is, 265 maybe. But it'll fail somewhere in the middle, so it won't set a fault. You won't get any kind of warning or alert, but it just won't actually let the heat come on. It thinks the car is too warm, therefore it's not gonna let the heat go through and like the doors move to allow heat to come out of the vents. So that's probably what's going on. You can monitor that with a scan tool and see what temperature it's reading versus the temperature that is actually inside the box. There is a measured value block in 08, which is the address word for climatronics or climatic. You can monitor that and see what it's reading. Or you can simply roll the dice and replace it. I don't remember the sensor being that expensive, and I think it was fairly somewhat easy to get to. So I would start with that as long as everything else is good, but take a good look at your coolant. Make sure that your coolant is in good condition, because a little bit of blockage at the bottom of the heater core can actually cause the heat not to work. This was a big issue in the diesels, so just double check that and make sure that that's what's going on. A lot of the newer cars have the heater core right next to where your leg would be if you're the driver, so just above the gas pedal and in towards the center of the car. Just be really careful if it's hot. So check those things, but odds are, man, if everything else is good, it's probably that temperature sensor inside the heater box. All right, I don't have a name on the next one, and I love that this isn't a Volkswagen question. I'm pretty good on the VW Audi side, but I like when other car questions come in too. I have a 2000 Pathfinder, and during the colder weather, I noticed my thermometer will never read normal operating temperatures. During the winter months, this does not happen. However, I've noticed that when I park the car for a bit, it will go back up. Is this a radiator issue or a thermostat issue? Thanks. So the way I'm understanding this question is the temperature gauge doesn't get all the way up to operating temperature when it's cold outside. And it seems to be that maybe when it's moving, it's not, but when it's stopped and let sit for a few minutes, it is okay. So what we have to do whenever we're looking at these kind of cooling systems, no matter what this question is going on, this is how I approach it. When is the failure occurring? Is it while driving or is it while stopped? Let's go on the while driving first. So while you're driving, you probably have more coolant flow. Generally, either a timing belt or a serpentine belt is rotating the water pump. The higher RPM is going to spin the pump faster, so you should have more coolant flow off idle than at idle while you're moving. So we need to look at that. do we have enough coolant flow while we're driving? A lot of the Volkswagen water pumps, the plastic ones, would actually be okay at idle and then fail while driving. We also have to look at, we have more airflow coming across the radiator through the front of the car. Perhaps it's too much airflow. You know, it says colder weather. Is that in the 50s because you're in California? Is it in the teens like here in the South today? Or is it really cold like in places in Canada? So that's an answer I don't have. So we have to look at how much airflow is coming across the radiator. We have to make sure that like the fan's not stuck on and we're getting extra flow and that air is really cold coming across the radiator. Those are a couple things we want to look at. Also, thermostat placement can have something to do with it. If your thermostat is on the front side of the vehicle, so facing forward of the vehicle, and you're getting a fan stuck on, and you're getting all that extra cold air coming through, that can tweak out the thermostat and just actually keep it too cold. On the idle side, we have to think less coolant flow, less airflow, possibly fans coming on more often depending on the situation. So there's all kinds of things that are going on and like we have to isolate them. When is it happening and what's the car doing? If this were me and the car's not getting up to temperature, I would probably look at the thermostat first. That's generally the thing that causes a car not to get up to temp first. The other thing we need to look at, right, is that it may actually be getting up to temp and it may be the reading that you're getting is incorrect. A lot of sensors have 2 wires, some coolant temp sensors have 4 wires. On the Volkswagen side, the older 4-wire ones, one side went to the cluster, one side went to the ECM. The newer ones are all CAN bust and shot around the circuit by the ECM. So we have to look at that as well. It could simply be that the signal you're getting in the instrument cluster is not accurate. You can take something like a temp gun or one of those really cool thermal cameras that I did a review on and see what the temperature is at the thermostat, and that might tell you, or you can find the coolant temp sensor and see what the coolant temperature is right there. So I would probably guess, right, this is just going to be a guess, I'd probably guess you have a thermostat issue. You can check the temperature of the hose going into the thermostat versus out of the thermostat. If it's ice cold, that means your thermostat may not be opening all the way. So do those little checks, think about what's going on when this is happening, and go from there. Unfortunately, I don't have a just replace this part answer because you guys know that's not what I do because a lot of times you can be wrong with that information. All right, next one comes from Sherman. Dear Humble Mechanic, I appear to have the dreaded vacuum pump leak on my '08 Rabbit. The question is, what are the consequences of not replacing the leaking pump? The leak is so far seems minimal and I can live with a few dots of oil in the driveway. The brakes seem to work fine. Are there any long-term consequences or damage as long as the leak remains minimal? If the leak is bad enough to affect the brake performance, what happens? Does the brake pedal get a spongy feeling? Sherman, great question. So I've done videos on this oil pump leak before. I'm not gonna beat that up. I'll put links to 2 videos that you guys can watch, how it fails and how to replace it. It's a very easy job to replace. Just follow those steps exactly I show you in the video and it's no problem. Probably save you $500 or $600 or more by taking it rather than taking it to a shop. So what are the long-term consequences of not doing anything about it? Well, if you're getting oil on the driveway, that means the leak's actually pretty significant. What happens is the wells on top of the transmission can fill up with oil, and that can then spill over and leak down onto the ground. As far as leaks go, you know, it's not a catastrophic oil leak where you're gonna get in your car in the morning, you're gonna check your oil, you're gonna drive to work, and then you're gonna get to work and you're gonna have no oil in your engine, right? It's not that kind of oil leak. Very, very minor in the grand scheme of oil leaks. But here's what I can get concerned about more than oil leaking on the ground. You'll never really have an issue with, well, I shouldn't say never, you're almost never have an issue with brake performance. So this isn't gonna have any impact on the brake pedal unless the pump totally fails. Then it won't provide vacuum assist. You can tell this because the brake pedal begins to feel like if you mash the brakes when your car hasn't been running for an hour and it's just like a hard brick, like you're pushing on a brick. That's what it feels like with no assist. Not to mention the brake performance is reduced drastically. But unless that happens, you're not going to experience any issues with the brakes. What I worry about more, especially on the automatic transmissions, is that oil getting into the connectors for the valve body of the transmission. They're on the front side, oil leaks down, and it can get on those connectors. It can saturate the seal in oil, it can make for poor connections. So I worry about that a lot when it comes to these oil leaks. That's probably, not guarantee, there can always be something else. That's probably the worst you're going to experience by not replacing the pump. I don't think I've ever seen any other ill effects of not doing that vacuum pump right away. But I would get it fixed. It's something that, you know, you don't want to have electrical issues or connector issues because of an oil leak, because I guarantee you that'll be more expensive. And you'll still have to fix the oil leak, so it's not like you get out of fixing the oil leaks by just fixing this other thing. So I would plan to get it fixed. Follow the DIY I did. It's super, super easy. If you have a manual transmission, it's even easier. It's like 4 bolts. It should take you maybe 45 minutes at the most, including cleaning up the oil. So follow the video if you want to learn how to do it yourself. Should be a link to the pump. Just double check and make sure that's the right one for your VIN. And plan on replacing it, but it's not like your brakes are gonna have any kind of problem. All right, got time for one more. This one comes from Simon. What are your thoughts on genuine parts over aftermarket parts? I found ball joints and bushings, the genuine ones last a lot longer than aftermarket ones. So what do you think, in price of genuine parts and the lifespan over cheaper aftermarket parts that may last less time? Thanks, Simon. So what we're talking about is, what do I think is better, an OEM part or an aftermarket part when it comes to things like bushings and ball joints and stuff like that? So this really can go either way. There are some OE parts that when you get an aftermarket part, it is exactly the same thing. It comes off the same line. The only difference, maybe, it might not have the manufacturer logo on it. So for example, a new ball joint from company A may be the exact same as a VW genuine ball joint, it just doesn't have the VW emblem on it. It happens all the time. In that case, it doesn't matter, right? Save probably $25, and you might not get like the really cool Volkswagen box packaging. Then there's other ones that you get it and you look at it and go, I wouldn't ever put this in my car. You can see like poor quality welds, or the fitment's not quite right, or the tolerances are incorrect, or you just look at it and it just looks cheap. That's when I have a problem. You know, there's a lot we can talk about in the OE versus aftermarket parts world. When it comes to maintenance stuff, a lot of times the aftermarket stuff can be great, because a lot of times the aftermarket stuff is either the same or it can actually be a little bit better. So this is really case by case. It depends on the part. Overall, as a whole, I would, if money weren't an option, I would always replace a part with a factory OEM part. Unfortunately, money is almost always an option, so I usually try and find what looks to be the best quality for the least price. And if we can find one that's made by the same manufacturer, win, win, win. You know, bushings, suspension bushings, is there gonna be that much difference between an OE one and an aftermarket one? Probably not. It's probably the same thing. It just really depends. And you mentioned it in your question, we have to weigh the cost of replacing it with an OE part versus replacing it with an aftermarket part. If an OE part is gonna last 10 years and it's $100, and a aftermarket part is gonna last 5 years and it's $50, now we have to add labor in. So the parts are gonna be the same, but we're gonna pay to do the labor twice, or we're gonna have to DIY it twice ourselves. So you need to look at this case by case. Always err on the side of a genuine OE part. There are also parts houses like CRP, like SSF, that sell a lot of both factory stuff, maybe without the logos on it, and after factory stuff. And you can look at their stuff and kind of gauge how a good part is versus a bad part is. You know, look at the casting on it. Look at, again, like I said, the tolerance and the fitment. Hold it up to the old one and go, this one may be broke, but I can see like the fitment or the pattern of the bolts isn't quite right. Maybe it looks weird or squishes weird, something like that. You really got to put each one of these individuals' things in your hand. Of course, there's better companies out there and there's worse companies out there. A lot of the Chinese stuff is not awesome. But again, it's cost of part versus OE, and it's cost of labor. That's the one that's gonna get you, cost of labor versus OEM. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, you know what to do. Hey, if you like this video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. Don't forget to ding the bell when you subscribe on the YouTube page. You can also sign up for Humble Mechanic updates at humblemechanic.com. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course on Snapchat. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for tolerating my cold garage. My hands are freezing, even though I have a heater right back here. That's it. I'm done. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. No drink of the day because it's probably frozen by now. And it would be iced coffee anyway, and then you'd be like, Charles, it's cold out. Why are you drinking iced coffee? You're an idiot. And I'm like, well, I'm an idiot for a lot of reasons, so sorry.